This is Flick.
This is Rudy.
And this week it will be part one of our countdown of the decade's dozen, the best 12 albums of the decade, or at least our favorites.
All right, here's one you may well know, you may not know it, and if you don't know it, I really don't know where you've been. So you should know the tune. Here we go.
Can you honestly tell me that you forgot? Forgot the magnetism of Robin Zander or the charisma of Rick Nielsen?
That's kid stuff.
Kid stuff. Well, how about the tunes? I want you to want me. The Dream Police. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Your mama's all right. Your daddy's all right.
It's just come up to 5:35 a.m. Kommen Sie bitte und listen to Kraftwerk.
I don't know, man. I kind of like Van Halen.
Well, yeah, Plum, you do. And you know why you do? Because corporate America is shoving something down your throat and making you believe it because that's what they want you to believe. I mean...
Okay, buddy. I was just trying to cheer us up, so go ahead. Put on some old sad bastard music, see if I care.
That was Big Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell, a song in which Joni complains that they paved Paradise to put up a parking lot. A measure which actually would have alleviated traffic congestion on the outskirts of Paradise, something which Joni singularly fails to point out, perhaps because it doesn't quite fit in with her blinkered view of the world. Nevertheless, nice song.
I get by because the people make a special effort to shop here. Mostly young men who spend all their time looking for deleted Smith singles and original, not re-released underline Frank Zappa albums.
Yes! I mean, look, you can play an E pentatonic scale at 100 miles an hour till somebody's ears burn off. You can learn that, right? But finding the tangents within the framework, therein lies the artistry, man.
Fellas, does it sound good?
Yeah.
Does it feel good? Yeah. God made your ears. You didn't make them. You gonna argue with God's ears? If it sound good and it feel good, then it's musical. So play it like I say play it. From the top.
That was Sweating Lunatic Iggy Pop, part of our Tuesday night punk pack, which is climaxing at midnight with Madness. This is Norfolk Nights with Alan Partridge, and we're in the middle of Super Talk. Super Talk!
Just about to jump into our top 12 of the decade, but it has been a fantastic week for new music. I actually haven't been able to get through all of it. I just want to throw out, I'm putting it up on the on our page on Spotify. The featured article for me this week is an EP. It's all Neil Young covers by two artists I don't know very well, Jeff Rosenstock and Laura Stevenson. I can't remember where I even figured out that this was just put out. It's probably because it's on polyvinyl. The other big polyvinyl release this week is there's new music from Of Montreal. I'll post that too. The Of Montreal is a little on the sedate side. I'm actually excited. I've got to go see Of Montreal when they come through town here. But I'm posting this a version of Ambulance Blues from the Still Young EP by Jeff Rosenstock and Laura Stevenson. I'm going to post it, and it's a pretty faithful rendering. I do like the arrangement for male and female voice. It's pretty faithful-ish. It's certainly reverent for about the first maybe like 70%. And then after that, it is definitely an updated arrangement. I will not go any further than that. I actually think it works. The EP is actually really, really good. These are much younger people than you and I, so it's like for them to be finding Neil Young on their own is great. It seems like the kids have figured out Neil's great, and we're starting to get some really good Neil covers. Maybe one week we can do an all Neil covers show. I'm going to post the cover of Ambulance Blues from Jeff Rosenstock and Laura Stevenson, and the last thing I want to say on it is Laura Stevenson is going to come through town here. I live between Jersey City and Newark, like about 8 miles west of Manhattan, or west of Manhattan. And Jersey City has really started to become a live music venue. It really wasn't for a long time. or I didn't think it was. We're seeing great acts there all the time, but Laura Stevenson is coming through playing a venue that is opened in Jersey City, named Monty Hall. So there's a lot of equity for me in this EP, in the career of Laura Stevenson, and the fact that I have a chance of seeing her at Monty Hall in Jersey City, New Jersey. So big things.
That's one of those jokes you make in college that I'm taking politics 101 over in Monty Hall.
Well, I don't know exactly the story of why you would name a venue. It's 2020. Like, I'm not sure who gets the joke. Like, how old do you have to be to get the joke? Like, I know, like, Shoo Shoo is playing there. They get some, like, more adventurous fare there. I can't imagine that the average Shoo Shoo fan is in on the Monty Hall joke. But, I don't know. I'd go see Shoo Shoo. I dig them quite a bit. If they come through again, I'll go.
That's why they're inside jokes, though.
That's true. So I'm gonna rep for New Jersey a little bit. The Hoboken, Jersey City, Newark triangle is way more fertile if you throw in like South Orange, where Seton Hall University is. It's not the worst place in the world to see shows. I'll say that. Like, the fact that if you could just go one more stop and be in New York City is probably, it's the fact that we're in the shadow of the greatest music city in America that makes it a little harder. But I'm very pleased with the quality of acts coming through suburban New Jersey. Good times for all.
Well, and if you want to go to that great music city, you don't have that far to travel though either. So it's not. Yeah. It's a little bit not. Our situations are not similar, I guess.
No. But I was worried that by losing Maxwell's, which really was the sort of center of the music scene around here, I thought that was like the death of things. But Jersey City has become so bougie and so gentrified. It's really starting to become like a city on its own. I lived there, so I'm biased. I really enjoy it, but the fact that there's a music scene blows my mind. Good times. So that's my contribution, but we had a very, very busy week. New Frank Black, new Peter, Bjorn, and John, new of Montreal, and then you had this album that I've been seeing getting a lot of good press, the album from Michael Kiwanuka.
Yeah, and so you haven't listened to it yet, though.
Well, I listened to the single that's on I've listened to I've Been Dazed.
Okay. Yeah, it is phenomenal. It is like, okay, so first of all, it came out 2 weeks ago, so I guess I'm a week late on it, but yeah, I've been listening to this for the week, and it is really just an amazingly beautifully arranged album with great songs. Oh boy, this is going to seem like a bit of hyperbole, but it is honestly. I don't want this to fall short of my praise, but I don't think it will. Like it's honestly like somebody decided to make a sequel to What's Going On. It's like an updated sequel to What's Going On. It really is that good. I think it will likely make my my list of the best of this year, and I can't say enough about it. So it is a collaboration. Danger Mouse is actually collaborating with Michael Kiwanuka on this album for the music, and the music is just phenomenal. It's just like kind of a 70s soul sort of feel to it. Kind of like What's Going On, and very much updated. A very much updated version of that, though.
Interesting. I won't claim I'm a huge, long-time fan of his, but I mean, I could see the parallel a little bit. There's already like 3 singles off this record, so this thing must be doing really, really well. It's in the millions of listens already. So I've got to, it's the holiday season. There's a ton of travel coming up for me. This is my prime music listening season. So having this full album to bring with and having all this other, I mean, I think Beck's entire album is out. The Prince 1999 box set comes out in like 10 days. This is going to be a very, very fertile season.
Yeah, and I don't, I really don't know about the numbers on the Kiwanuka album. I like to say, it's music, not math. I don't even look to see what the numbers are on the streams and all of that. It doesn't really.
Really? If you have a band that you're just like, you're just following this, somebody's playlist or just look up the band, then you don't go listen to like their top listened to thing to see whether that's your jam or not?
You mean if it's a band I don't know anything about, or
right?
Well, if it's a band I don't know anything about, I might go there just to see, just to listen to the first song that's on there. But I mean, I don't really put a lot of stock into that because, as I said, once before on here about that, a lot of times that number one song is side one, track one. It's just, it's just number one because of that. Basically, it's like the first one that they're going to go to. If it's a band that's been around longer and I can put a little bit more stock into what that number one selection might be, then yeah, I mean, but you really gotta weigh those factors, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I really don't have much of a sense of when something like this comes out. I don't really know, what the reception is. I just know what my ears tell me. It's like James Brown was saying in the in our intro, our new intro.
Yeah.
That's what I trust. I trust God's ears, as James Brown. Well, as Chadwick Boseman said, as James Brown.
Yeah, I trust Chadwick Boseman as James Brown, for sure. All right, you make a good point. I'm not going to deny I do look at popularity when I'm trying to find my way into a catalog that I don't know. But I call an audible, and I always verify against whether or not it's just a reflexive people just starting the first song. Having a song deep in the album have lots and lots of listens is almost always a good sign. It's a good leading indicator.
Yeah, I mean that's the sort of thing that you if you see that, if you see it and it doesn't have the obvious things that are going to lead to. I mean, another thing too, not that this is necessarily a strike against it, but I'm sure a lot of times the songs that come up as the most popular streams are probably used on the soundtrack to some Netflix show or something like that. And that's why that's why you might be seeing like a David Bowie song that, nobody ever really talked very much about. Now, all of a sudden, that's like the biggest streamed David Bowie song. Maybe that ended up on the soundtrack to some Netflix show or something like that,
right.
Which wouldn't necessarily make it a bad choice, but I'm just saying, that these are the kind of factors, and they don't necessarily tell you the story,
Well, you and I do plenty of show prep by just living, but we also do some real show prep where we sit and chat, and I'm glad we did not plan this, but I think that discussing the streaming product is the right way to intro the discussion of albums of the decade. And we didn't really talk about what we were going to talk about with each other, so I'm genuinely not trying to be Mr. King of the Hot Takes here, but this is the first decade where I really do feel like the album is not as important as the single or the stream before the album. And when I was going back and I looked at like this last decade has been fantastic for songs. Absolutely fantastic for songs. Like it doesn't necessarily rival like the peak productivity like the 60s or it doesn't rival like the tippy top of all time, but it's been a pretty great 10 years for music. And I don't think it's been as great a 10 years for albums. It's not that I couldn't come up with a list of 100 albums that I thought were really good or end to end even great, some of them. Like a couple, maybe, I don't know if perfect, I don't even know if there's a perfect album from this decade, but I feel like streaming in particular and the way that the record companies are releasing singles, like this Beck album is going to have like 3 singles out before the album comes out. And Beck's songs will have already been baked into a bunch of like mixed playlists by me for a month. I mean, Saw Lightning's been out for like 2 or 3 months. For me, no matter how great Beck's album is, it's going to be Saw Lightning. You know what I mean? Like everything that comes out after Saw Lightning, I'll take time and I'll enjoy, and the album could be great. But like it's I don't know if the album could be bigger than that song for me, and it just feels like that's been a really big part of the decade. When I went through and looked, I feel like it was a better decade for songs than it was for albums, which means it was pretty good because the songs were great and the albums, while they're not quite that great, are still pretty damn good. So that, I don't mean to be a downer, but that's the way I feel.
Okay, well, I agree, and we've talked about it before. I agree that the emphasis is on the singles. I mean, that's not really a new thing either. It's certainly before, I would say before the late 60s, before, maybe Sgt. Pepper's is like the dividing line. It was certainly about singles before that. It's probably even after that, the business was about singles. Like you could probably say the business has always been about the singles. I guess maybe the difference now is that artists that you might associate with great albums are turning to this sort of way of marketing themselves. Maybe that's what the difference is.
Artists can, again, in Britain, bands have always been able to put massive songs out as non-album singles, and it still works. I don't think they've ever really had a period where their artists could do that. But in America, that's not really been the sort of defining paradigm, that you would have, that bands could take songs that could anchor an entire album and just release them as sort of one-offs. That's a really uncommon thing in the U.S. market. But I feel like that has taken over. It's much more like the British idea where the non-album single can still be an absolute monster in the artist's catalog.
Okay,
that feels new.
So you're okay. So you're making the distinction between one-offs and singles then.
Well, to me, a single. So we're using the word single where we might actually want to make the distinction between a 7-inch record, a 12-inch record. You know what I mean? Like and like Saw Lightning. I don't know what physical format that's come out in. If there's a B-side, it's not on the streaming service.
Yeah, but you talked about the other Beck singles, and those are album tracks that are being issued as singles. So there's a difference there, even in just the Beck output.
True, but I would say even on my list of stuff for this year, almost all these albums had multiple. Again, so that maybe you're right, but what is the meaningful difference there between like a strong album cut and a single? Like, does it have to be physical product to be a single? Probably, well, I would say no.
Well, yeah, but if you're talking about like Saw Lightning, as opposed to the other Beck songs that are out there now as singles, those are meant to be part of a package. And normally you might get the package first, but the way things are now, you're getting like a good portion of that big package piecemealed out to you, whereas Saw Lightning is a standalone single. So,
well, all right, I guess I'm gonna have to come back at this angle. I can't quite articulate, or I'm not quite there, but like the case in point is like I believe early in this decade, Devo had an incredible. Most reunions, let's be honest, most like reunions of your hero old bands, most of them aren't that great. They very rarely produce music that is competitive with their classic lineup or their classic catalog. Devo did produce music that is competitive with their like prime catalog, but it was spread out all over the place. The album Something for Everybody came out in like 3 different formats or 4 different formats, and I bet they'll end up being like some deluxe and super deluxe edition with these huge variances in the tracking. That's like, and I actually hold Ockerville River partially responsible for that because they did that too with that one album where it came out in like 3 different forms before it was like the optimal form. That to me is a more also a common new phenomenon.
Yeah, that's kind of it's kind of an exaggeration. I mean, they came out with what was to be the album proper, and then supplemental tracks, and then it was later just a double album. So, yeah, I mean,
that's a modern thing. That's a modern thing, and there's a lot of those too now where dopes like you and me walk out and buy the album the day it comes out, and then of course, like literally a month later, some deluxe version comes out that of course has at least 1 or 2 good enough things that you end up having to buy both, and you feel like a complete dunce. That kind of thing has really, really amplified. And so, like, the definition of, like, what the great albums are for the last decade, do we really get to count these, like, final optimized everything in the kitchen sink titles, too? I had a couple of those that at the end of the day, like, I left off they're in my top 10, but they're not in my top 6. I think the Phosphorescent Muchacho album came out in a deluxe edition like 5 minutes after the original one came out. I don't know whether to leave it in or not. Like, I don't know if those fit.
Yeah, I mean, with the Ockerville River thing, I don't know how intentional that was. Like I think if they would have had their option to put that out as a double album to begin with, they probably would have done that. But being not really that established of a band at that time, they probably didn't have any option like that. Yeah. But then after it got out and got some success, probably more critical than sales wise, but get some success. That's that probably enabled them to put it out the way they wanted to or would have liked to in the first place.
Well, I don't need to empty my spleen any further on the topic, but I would say that if we're here doing this 10 years from now, I expect this next coming decade to be more like what the 50s was to albums. I think the 20s will be. I just think we're going to be a singles medium all the way through within 10 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like with that whole theory in mind, I was kind of thinking, with the recent crop of singles, that the Modest Mouse single that came out this past week.
Yep.
I don't remember the title of it. What, Ice Cream Party? Was that what it was?
Something like that.
So I listened to that thinking, yeah, that even for Modest Mouse, I don't think that is really the type of song that you release as a single. That's the sort of song that when it's on an album accompanied by other songs, it works better as part of that package. But as a standalone thing, it's sort of forgettable. It's one of those songs that I think probably gets better the more you listen to it, but in order to listen to it more, you probably need it to be accompanied by other songs that you like.
we could do a whole show on this. To me, that I agree with you on that. Like, is that a classic Modest Mouse single? Maybe not. But
Yeah,
would that fit in the middle of almost any like Modest Mouse playlist perfectly? I think so.
yeah. I mean, I think that's where albums are still going to be needed. You can't just release every song as a standalone thing because they don't. It's just not the proper venue for all of them.
But the reissues now, I mean, again, the sons of bitches at the record companies who like literally have figured out every possible way to repackage every possible scrap. They are onto something with this recent thing of doing it by the year or by the era, so that they'll be like, here is everything that this artist did in 1963, and doing music by the era or the the sessions or that sort of thing, I think is also going to be way more common in the next 10 years. So that we'll be talking about the era and not, I mean, some of these reissues are starting to come with their own extras reissues. So like I'm not a huge Eric Clapton fan, but 461 Ocean Boulevard is one of the greatest albums ever in rock music, in my opinion. And now there's a in the last reissue around that was a totally separate album of just rarities of that era, and it's great too. Like there's this sort of the way it's getting packaged, the way it's being remarketed, I don't think is totally optimized yet. I don't think everybody knows exactly how to do this to generate like maximum momentum, but eventually someone's going to hit on a formula, and I just don't believe it's going to look like the album as we know it. Like I think this, I just am saying, I'll wrap up my lukewarm take by saying this is probably the last decade where like it had even the chance of being could have been a great album decade.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up on this on my thought here. So I think when a single works as a single, then that's great. But a single that doesn't work, that falls flat, there's nothing more disposable than that. So like if everything gets released as a single, you're just going to have like a lot of disposable songs.
Which, I mean, that's what the internet is at this point, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm not saying that isn't how it's going to play out, but yeah, I mean that would be the downside of it. I think you would just have a lot of things that would just be sort of just passed by, for easily forgotten. I don't know.
We shall
I guess
see.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to figure it out. All right, so why don't, as being the gentleman that I am, I defer to you, sir. Let's jump in and let's put a quality dozen on the board of best albums of the last 10 years.
Yeah, and so with our previous discussion in mind, it's time to reward those who put out great albums.
Yes,
it's writing the novel as opposed to the pamphlet, for our purposes here. And so okay, my number 12, and to restate it, we're not doing all 12 of them tonight. We're doing 6, 6 through 12, or I'm sorry, 7 through 12 tonight, and next week we will do the top 6, our favorite 6 on each side.
Yep.
And so I'm going to start off tonight with one of my favorite bands, and their first album that they put out in the decade, and that is Whole Love by Wilco from 2011. Wilco at the time was coming off of 2, I think, probably good sellers for them. Again, it's music, not math, so I don't really know the numbers, but I certainly know that Sky Blue Sky, which probably, I would say, fairly saddled the band with the term dad rock. I would say that, for that album, that was fairly just. It is the album that sold quite a lot of Volkswagen Jettas, if you recall those commercials. it's a successful record. It's not one of the most exciting Wilco records to me, but certainly one that's hard to dislike, and I think that that's why it was so successful. And that was followed up with Wilco, the album, which is certainly not the album that I would attach my name to, because that one was very forgettable. So they're coming off those albums, and you're kind of wondering where do they go next? You know, maybe their best work is already behind them, and then they drop a great album to start off the decade in Whole Love, and more sonically interesting than the albums before it, and I think the songs are a better bunch of songs, you know, than the best bunch of songs that they've had, at least going back to Ghost is Born. Maybe even it might even be better than that one for the songs. But a strong album to start the decade. I think that, you know, what they've come out with since then is good too. I don't think as good as Whole Love, and that's why it's the one that made the list for me.
Interesting. Where do you rank it in their catalog overall?
Oh, well, it's probably that's a good question. I think it's a good mile marker for where they were at that time. It's certainly not as good as Summer Teeth or Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. I don't know if we're considering like the Woody Guthrie albums in there. It's not as good as, you know, the first Billy Bragg and Wilco Woody Guthrie album. Being There is probably better as well. But yeah, it's the front of the middle, I guess, is where I would put it.
That's not bad. I mean, by then they'd been around. They weren't kids. You know what I mean? Like that, like you said, they were at a crossroads and they pulled an ace, which so often is not what happens. You know, so often at that moment they go on autopilot.
Yeah, and yeah, it was coming off of two albums where it's just sort of like they might be hitting, you know, they might just be leveling off now. And so I think it was a strong, I don't necessarily want to say a comeback. They weren't really coming back from something. But you know, along those lines.
All right, that's a very interesting call. I am not the Wilco fan you are. I'd have to take your word for it. But again, just because I don't fly the Wilco flag as high as you, I enjoy it. I mean, I don't know that album back and forth, but they've never put out anything that wasn't top shelf. So, but I will definitely put that on my to-do list. I'm going to kick off with an album which, again, we didn't really establish like criteria, and to some extent, this is just feeling for me. I picked the M83 album "Hurry Up, We're Dreaming," which has the song that Midnight City, which I think drove people crazy for most of the decade. It has one of the more sharp and brassy keyboard figures I think you're going to hear. I will post that if you haven't heard it. I'm guessing everybody, I mean, if you've walked through a grocery store or casino in the last 3 years, you've heard it. I saw them on this tour at the Austin City Limits Festival, I believe, and the sun was setting as they came on, and they just started with that massive sound that kicks this album off. The song is called Intro. Like, I don't know. There was something about just, it was a beautiful day. The weather was beautiful. It was like one of those like gentle, it had been hot. It was still a little on the hot side, but by Texas standards, it was just a very gentle evening, and everybody was a little bit on the blissed outside by Texas standards, you know. And it was one of those concerts where I was so glad they were staying true to the album and playing the album and just being immersed in that sound. I had liked the record. My first pass listening to it was a little bit too long. It would have been a better single album, and that might still be true, but that's a criticism that could be leveled at every package. Like Joe Strummer said, when people complained about Sandinista, like, yeah, if the triple album would have made a better double album, it would have been an even better single album, would have been the greatest EP ever. That would have been our best single ever. It's an argument you can't win. And so I'm not going to ding him for it, even though it's probably a little larded up. The singles are massive, and they were a band who was like right on the cusp of, they were either going to be sort of like bedroom keyboard, like a bedroom band, very insular, very sort of culty, or were they going to make the big breakthrough and put out that massive giant song and massive giant album? They did choose the latter. Time is, I don't know exactly if people are going to be bumping this record in 20 years. I don't know. But the number of records that have been made in this decade that are going to live forever, is a fairly small thing. Maybe it's a product of its time. I don't care. I really enjoyed it. I got an incredible amount of pleasure listening to it. Seeing it in concert, it was pretty faithfully rendered. But I acquired a new sort of feeling for the thing as a whole. And I've really enjoyed just having this record on and playing in the background. I go to it way more often than I should. So I can't make like an objective case that it's great or timeless. It's none of those things. It's just I have a lot of positive feeling. I really enjoyed it, and I still do. And I'm going to put it in I'm going to use the word best when I probably should use the word favorite, or I don't know if it's the best, but it's one of my favorites, and it's going to be where I start.
Yeah, it's easy to have that slip of the tongue, but yeah, these are favorites. Like I'm not going to claim that I've heard every record in this decade that matters.
Yeah.
I haven't, but I'm sure that even if I had, I don't feel like most of these on my list are going to get bumped by them because I love them so much. Like I certainly have 12 albums here that I feel very, very strong about. So I have no problem, feeling like maybe they are the best, but really they're my favorites because objectively speaking, I haven't listened to everything that needs to be listened to.
Yeah. So, you know what? I think we should allow ourselves to use the words best and favorite interchangeably here without. It's a party foul at worst. I think we'll survive.
Yeah. To anybody that would be listening, just take that with a grain of sand.
Yeah.
If you hear the word best and you object, well, just fill in, just white out. Use your ear white out, and then put in. If anybody knows what white out is anymore, does anybody?
Wow,
know?
Yeah, that's right. You are so dating yourself. Not that our music selections don't.
So use the edit function and just replace the word best with favorite.
Good times.
All right, so my number 11 on this list is Rips by XX. That is from 2014. That is the band that Mary Timony started after Wild Flag. She just came on with another strong batch of songs. The Wild Flag album was great and had great songs. And she just kept on rolling with more well-crafted, kind of new wavy sounding, very, very much going back to sort of the late 70s, early 80s guitar-driven pop songs that you would associate with the new wave movement. But, again, updating that. And just an end-to-end, just great listen. Just the kind of stuff that, you talk about putting on the M83 album and feeling good and whatever. This maybe isn't so much of the background sort of album. I think it's more of a foreground sort of album, but it is something that is you can just put it on, leave it on, and it's just you're going to I don't know, feel it. It's a feeling no pain sort of situation.
Yeah, it's great. Again, they've never done anything that wasn't really, really good. And I admit the more and we've talked about them a little bit, and after talking about them, I've gone back and spent more time with it, and it's actually again it does what all the great pop stuff does, is it seems very simple and straightforward on your first pass through, but the more time you spend with it and the more you let it, if you just take it as it's intended, like there's a lot in there.
Yeah, well, it's funny too. Like, I think most people don't think about it from the standpoint of how a song is crafted. But I think it was either Mary Timony or somebody else in the band was commenting in an interview with them that I saw once, where she was talking about how much easier it is to write a song like she had written with Helium or any of her stuff, prior to Wild Flag, how much more difficult it is to craft a song like they did for the XX albums. It's so much harder to do that than what she had been doing prior.
Right.
And the stuff, the Helium stuff and things like that are going to be the kind of things that, because they're more foreign to the ear, most people are thinking, that they took, maybe more imagination or whatever. They might have more critical acclaim for that sort of thing. But, from the standpoint of crafting the song, she was talking about how this is much more challenging, to do.
She is getting better with time in a lot of ways, I think. She's got enough diversity in her catalog too, where she's got a pretty wide vocabulary, and gets better as a songwriter. There's a chance that her best stuff is ahead of her, and I don't know if I'd say that about everybody on my list.
Well, I can certainly say that like, to me, she's been one of the best artists in this decade. Like the role that she's been on pretty much the whole decade. She's right up there with anybody. Like what's ahead, you never know what's ahead. But for this decade, very strong.
Yeah. Good call. That is a good listen. It's a good hang for the ears. As I was working on my list, again, you, sir, Mr. Flick, are an inspiration in the sense that you say there's no such thing as like a guilty pleasure. That if you like the music, just like it and enjoy it for what it is. But I'm not quite there yet. I'm not really able to like decompress. I'm a little more uptight about those things than you are. So I was a little disappointed in myself in my overall choices, because what I realized, and again, I'm not trying to do a hot take here, but last decade, the first decade of the 21st century, was to me one of the all-time great eras for both singles and albums. 2000 to 2010, I think, rivals the 60s to some degree. It might be a little overstatement. Certainly rivals the 80s. Certainly rivals the 80s.
Okay, yeah.
Remember, the 80s started fantastic, but by 1985, Don Johnson was everywhere. So I'm going to put the 2000s like in the nosebleeds of high. I hold it in nosebleed high esteem. And what I've realized is there's a certain faction in my current list that is really just the last album in a long string of great albums going back to the prior decade. And so, like, a lot of my albums are front-loaded to the first half of the decade, and a lot of them are from bands who you might say hit their absolute peak probably in the decade before, but still could, like, justify the high accolades into this current decade. So I'm going to put as my second or my number 5 for today. I'm going to take the Magnetic Fields album Realism, which came out in 2010. And while I do not believe it is as good as the album that preceded it, which is Distortion, which is from 2008, which we've talked about it, you and I have. I just want to make another plug for it. Uh, Distortion. At that point, I think Stephen Merritt, the guy behind Magnetic Fields, he basically has to come up with themes to get himself to record an album. So he did 69 love songs, and he's done. He did 50 songs. I think he had an album like 2 years ago called 50 Songs, 1 year for every year of his life. The album Distortion was he wanted to take a batch of songs and record it so it sounded exactly like Jesus and Mary Chain's Psycho Candy, which that album is turned 30 this week, by the way, which we could devote an entire show to the Psycho Candy, in my opinion. Psycho Candy, to me, is one of the all-time great albums, and the fact that any band would basically go out of their way to record a total perfect imitation of it is fantastic, and Distortion is fantastic. It's perfect imitation, and the songs are there. So then when they came out after Distortion, he comes out with an album that's sort of paired with it called Realism. And it is it is deliberately as organic as Distortion is distorted. The songcraft is there. I think he's probably, this is again, I'm really coming with the hot takes. I put Stephen Merritt in like greatest living songwriter consideration for America anyway. I cannot believe how great his songcraft is. Even his shitty stuff is like 10 times better than most people's best, hundreds of times better than most people's best. And while this is not necessarily going to go down as like the greatest Magnetic Fields album, having them being a couple ticks away from their peak in this decade is still going to put them ahead of most. So I understand that I'm sort of being Distortion adjacent here by giving it to by putting Realism on the list, but I stick by it. Stephen Merritt's awesome. This album is awesome, and if you don't like, I think the songcraft is so good here that the arrangement is secondary. It's just he's good. The album's good, and that stretches their peak. I'm really surprised, Flick, that you're not more of a Magnetic Fields fan than you are, to be honest with you.
You know what? Put them on the I'm gonna make you love me.
I am gonna make you love me. I'm gonna make you.
So yeah,
all right, here we go.
The time will tell. Time will tell on that one.
Yeah, challenge accepted.
All right. Okay, so my next one is the second album by Angel Olsen, another one that I feel has just had an overall super strong decade. One of the best. She hasn't put out a dud in this decade as far as albums go, and I'm gonna say that Burn Your Fire for No Witness is my favorite of her albums. That came out in 2014, and it is number 10 on my list.
Yeah, when you told me we were talking, I sort of knew you were going to take this because we did talk a little bit about it. I was jealous you picked this, and it made me realize, like, shit, I should have picked that. Because you're right on all counts. She's also getting better. I don't know if every album has gotten better since then. That would be a stretch, but I think what she is capable of doing, no one's really seen all of it yet. She's had a great run. This album, I mean, the song "Unfuck the World," which is the first song. I swear I've listened. I don't know if you can download your stats from Spotify. I swear I've listened to that song like 100,000 times by now. The whole album's good. The album title is great too. So I'm jealous.
Yeah, and my favorites actually are High and Wild and High Five. I like those a lot because those kind of have the feel that it's sort of, she's sort of that singer in the honky tonk sort of thing, but it's also very much of its time as well, meaning 2014. And so but the thing about her is she what the album that you might think is the best, everybody might have a different choice for that because she goes to so many different places with her songs that it really comes down to what your preferences are. What sort of things you favor. You know, I like her rockers, you know, or her more mid-tempo rockers, you know. But she definitely gives you like sort of the straight singer-songwriter type of thing as well. You know, she can very much do the you know, just singer and guitar sort of thing, or she can do the full band sort of thing equally well.
Yep. Pretty strong choice. I'm gonna also, just for fun, she did there was this the Man in the High Castle had an album come out in 2017, the TV show, I think it is. I don't know. I've never watched it. I'm never going to. But it's a lot of contemporary artists doing covers. It's all covers. Beck does Can't Help Falling in Love. Angel Olsen does Who's Sorry Now. It's fantastic. I'm putting that on a playlist. And Michael Kiwanuka does Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. I'll throw that in our Covers for Lovers 4. And Granddaddy's cover of Love Hurts is on that record too. So Angel Olsen, All Day, Always. I'm going to throw in a little extra for you from 2017. But great choice, Master Flick.
And you did say Granddaddy, right?
Yeah, Granddaddy. I'll put that on.
Yeah, nice. I've actually gone back to the Granddaddy well recently, so it'll be nice.
Yeah, the reissues have been good too. Like, again, maybe I don't know anything about how records are marketed, but like anytime a deluxe edition of an album comes out, that means someone else somewhere out there digs this record, and seeing them starting to get these deluxe reissues, getting Granddaddy is a good sign. It means that stuff's not going to get lost.
Yeah, I would say 06 was a very Granddaddy heavy year for me, at least like the later part of 06, I recall. Don't ask why I can remember things so specifically like that, but it was late 06. Late 06, there was a lot of Granddaddy.
Oh, don't ask why.
A lot of M Ward, a lot of Granddaddy in late 06.
You could do way worse than that.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's fantastic.
Well done, sir. All right, so I this may be controversial, but I put a covers album, and I know that's absurd. It's absurd, and I think even a year ago on this album, I would have not been as effusive about. I've listened to this and its companion. It's Rogue Wave has an album called Cover Me, and then they had extras from that session put out as like a supplemental record. I'm dating myself. This is all dad rock at this point, and I don't care. There's a cover of The Cure's In Between Days on here that's so good. Like, it's not better than the original, because in The Cure, if you're a Cure nerd like I am, like, Head on the Door is a pretty special album, and he would never say anybody really compares with it. But Rogue Wave's Cover Me album has their cover of In Between Days is out of hand good. Their cover of Pete Townshend's Let My Love Open the Door is out of hand good. And then in the supplemental record, the part 2, this is again me being totally chintzy, but the cover of In a Big Country. I liked all those songs. I still have the original 7-inch of Let My Love Open the Door that I bought at Osco for 79 cents. I think it literally still has the 79-cent sticker from Osco on it. Like, I love all these songs, so it's cheating. Like, I'm taking songs I love and then just saying, hey, one of the greatest albums of the last 10 years is a rearrangement of songs I already loved. Like, yeah, I feel like I guess that's kind of shitty to do, but I'm putting it on there. I understand. Like, I roll my eyes at myself, so it doesn't bother me if others want to roll their eyes at this choice. The Rogue Wave covers album that came out in 2017 is just something I love listening to. I've listened to it many, 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 many times, and I'm not going to stop. And at some point, I just have to admit I love it, and I think it's great, and I love their arrangements. And I think it's like the most fun record that I routinely go for. So I would lose a purity test here, but it's so much fun to listen to. Like, there you go.
Well, we were talking before, like before the show, we were talking about the Cat Power covers album. So if you would have picked that for one of your favorites of the O's or the aughts, I don't think anybody would have blamed you for that.
Okay, good. I feel self-conscious about it because Rogue Wave is not like nothing they've done could be called like some serious heavy statement. You know, and they're actually kind of derivative and kind of also Rand, but and I don't know. Someday we're gonna have to do a confessional, and then I can drop the topic because like there are albums out there. I love the first Flock of Seagulls albums, and I don't care who knows it. To be really honest with you, like I have albums like that in my life, which I would never tell anybody is like a massive artistic statement that I just love, and this is one of them, and it's on my list. There you go.
All right. Okay, so number 9 we're at. All right, so my number 9 is "They Want My Soul" by Spoon, and Spoon, I have to say, I think has been one of the most consistent and reliable bands in the last 2 decades, and I know that doesn't like these aren't the most exciting words that you can describe somebody with. But it really, like, to me, that really has value. Like, there hasn't been a Spoon album, really, I think, ever that has been a disappointment to me in any way. They've just always brought it, one album after another. And I think, so They Want My Soul was, let me get the year on that. But 14?
Yep.
So 14 was kind of a big year for my list, I think. Angel Olsen, XX, and Spoon, all from 2014.
Good year.
And yeah, I mean, it's as good as all of the Spoon albums are, in my opinion. I think this is the best one, and it's not the best. Like, I won't say it's head and shoulders above the others, because they're all strong. But it is a very good, one to keep on going back to.
So I have been working a little bit on the Spoon catalog. I went back and figured out I do own a couple Spoon albums, none of which I could say I've like listened to end to end. In most of the time, I usually bought it for a single, but I know this album that you're talking a little bit, and I can't say I'm a master of it, but who could argue with you about at this point about Spoon? They have a consistent level of quality. Nothing is ever below the threshold of listenable. You know what I mean? Like, they're incapable, I think, of producing a record that isn't listenable. It's just debatable as to how much you really, if you love them or not. You're not the only person who loves music who loves Spoon, for sure.
Yeah, and certainly, like, I don't want to make them sound just like they just constantly put out adequate stuff. That's definitely not what I'm saying. Like, they just continuously put out really good to great stuff. And it's just remarkable to me how they keep on doing it. There hasn't really been a point where they've dipped at all, and I do continuously go back to them. I go back to them quite regularly, and then again, this is the one I think is probably the one to start with if you're gonna find your way into Spoon. This is a good album to start with.
Yeah. Agreed. I promise to work my way through the Spoon catalog because, again, too many people I know love them too much for it not to be a gem.
Yeah, and
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and just gonna say that, like, this is going long into their career, and to have the album that might be the best one, it is debatable because you could go back to Gimme Fiction or Ga Ga Ga, and that might, I mean, certainly that's probably going to be the one or the other one that that people go to as like the best one. But so many years down the road, then have another landmark like this. It's a strong career.
Well, Gaga Ga is the first one I bought, and that one had some pretty big singles on it. For them to, you're right, they did have a pretty great string there, and the fact that they were making that far in is pretty good, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna go. I'm starting to have my next one is one of these artists where I think I could have made a case for more than one of their records being present in a top list. And after doing my list, I went and read bunch of other lists like Pitchfork and all the usual suspects. And everybody picked from her, but they picked a different record than I did. I picked St. Vincent's self-titled record up next for me. That is the one with the cover of her where it looks like to me she looks like a priest or something. But she had a really productive decade. Most people picked Strange Mercy from her, which is pretty close. I suppose I could have picked that, but St. Vincent to me is like the modern era's Kate Bush, where it's not only there's not any aspect of the record creating game that she is not elite at. She can write, she can produce, she can play, there's really not an aspect of the songwriting is there, the performances are there, the collaborations, the production, the creativity. There's not a single thing that I expect from the elite of the elite to do that she hasn't done more than once. This album for me has it's more cohesive, it works better together, but she's doing. The last album was really good too, and in fact, she put out like 2 different versions of it. There's like a more organic version. I think she calls them like slow and fast. But St. Vincent to me is going to be, I think, remembered as one of the most important people making music during this decade. She pulled at least 3 or 4 excellent albums out. A couple of them I think are like a Mount Rushmore elite. I happen to go with the self-titled one. You could have gone with the one before it. The one with David Byrne is kind of interesting, I guess, but that I don't lump that in with the rest of the stuff. That stretch of Mass Education, the self-titled one, and Strange Mercy, that's pretty untouchable. She's pretty untouchable about most of the stuff she does. And there's some non-album stuff from that era too that's absolutely like knock your socks off great. So St. Vincent's self-titled one, but I don't know. St. Vincent to me in general is like in the running for like artist of the decade too.
All right. Okay. Okay. So it's on to number 8, and number 8 is another. So I didn't want to double dip on my list. For instance, well. I can't really give examples because this pertains to what we're talking about next week. But I didn't want to double dip, so I didn't have any 2 albums by the same artist in my list. But technically, I'm slightly double dipping on my next pick, and that is the Wild Flag self-titled album from 2011. That is my number 8 on my list. Double dipping because Mary Timony was also involved in this band. She was the first XX album is number 11 on my list. Wild Flag was a supergroup, and supergroups, as we know, often don't live up to the title. But a supergroup with Mary Timony, Carrie Brownstein, and Janet Weiss from Slater-Kinney, and just like I would say top. I don't know. I don't have the number for the top, but one of the top supergroups all time to me is Wild Flag. Just a powerhouse. This album is just like the power of a great rock band. Like that is what you get end to end with the Wild Flag album.
people are forgetting, like, I don't think I never thought Slater-Kinney would get back together again. I was mourning the loss of Slater-Kinney because I thought the Woods. I actually still think like the Woods is such an important album for 50 different reasons. I just saw on Twitter. I can't remember which member of Slater-Kinney was arguing. Somebody had posted like, "Wow, I got to see Slater-Kinney tonight, and I love the new records and everything, but hands down, like the Woods is the shit." And even the band had to reply back like, "Yeah, the Woods is the shit." Like they pretty much had to admit it. Like to go from the Woods and then there be nothing really sucked. And the fact that when the Wild Flag album came out, it all was right in the world. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it really was. It filled an immense hole for those of us who were like hanging at the end of the Woods, who just wanted one more of those. Just, it's not exactly like it's not a Slater-Kinney record in any real meaningful sense, but it does fill that void.
Yeah, and Corinne Tucker was doing good stuff on her own too. So, there wasn't really a loss of any good music after the end of Slater-Kinney, which isn't to say it wasn't nice to see them get back together. I wasn't disappointed with that either. But Slater-Kinney went away, but the good output did not. And and again, this goes back to Mary Timony's strong decade too. Like most of the songs here on the album are really hers. But just the way this band played together, just it's really, if you're not a fan of Janet Weiss, you're not a fan of drumming, and just her drumming on this, the guitar play between Brownstein and Timony is just incredible. It's just again, it's powerhouse. Like if you want to hear just a powerhouse rock band, this is a good album to check out.
I think Janet Weiss is my favorite drummer of the decade, although maybe last.
Yeah, I'll give her the last.
I'll give her millennium. I'll give her.
Yeah, I'll give her this century to this point.
Because the Quasi records too, there isn't much bad from Quasi, but like stuff like When the Going Gets Tough, that drum. I mean, her performance she's got 3 or 4 bands during this period where she literally lays wood. Like she literally lays the wood about as hard as could be done. And she's great. The whole band is great. Another one of your picks, sir, that I gladly would have taken for my own.
Yeah, well, it's not that we can't share some of these.
That's true, but I tried hard not to. Those those are fairly and squarely yours. The Wild Flag and the X-Hex. I'm gonna give you absolution there. That's not double counting at all. That's not double counting at all.
Yeah, it's not a technicality, but no. I felt a little bit.
Get you.
Twinge of guilt over it.
Very good. I am picking next. So I have my nephew is. I spent a lot of time with my nephews in the last 10 years, and they're young. They listen to music that's very, very popular, but they don't, not just popular stuff, but that's where a lot, and I don't listen to it at the time, but usually if I'm going to be exposed to stuff like Tyler, the Creator, or the Camp Flogna, or whatever the group is, I can't remember the group that Tyler Creator's in. Anyway, I kind of get all that shit secondhand from him because he really loves it. And like Earl Sweatshirt's record from 2018 is great. Like Earl Sweatshirt is pretty fucking great. That doesn't mean I listen to him all that often. So, like, I think if you and I weren't 2 old white guys and we were, just, even half our age, you could still be white kids, I guess. But if we were talking about, like, the music that really ruled this decade, and if you go read people's lists, it's shit like Beyonce, which I just don't hear it. It's not for me, I think. Like, Beyonce records, like, sometimes they're great. They're interesting, but it's just not my thing. Of all the stuff that I got put in my ears in the last 10 years by my nephew, the one that really stuck out is Frank Ocean's Blonde album. Frank Ocean is a generational talent. Frank Ocean made 2 albums there in a row that are going to be very, very hard for anybody to lay a glove on. Like the Channel Orange and then following that up with Blonde. Those 2 records are like this. I don't know if it's like, I don't know who this generation's Prince is. Like the 60s you had James Brown, the 70s I would give to Stevie Wonder, the 80s you have Prince. You have these incredible auteurs, these just incredible, could do everything. And I do think of Frank Ocean as being as close to that. The only person who's like in that neighborhood maybe is Kanye. I probably should have maybe picked a Kanye record for the list, but I don't really. I like it and I respect it, and I like and respect a lot of the super popular stuff. But the Frank Ocean album really is. It's perfect and it's deep and it's not emotional like I am. You know what I mean? Like it's really an achievement. I can't claim that I got it pumping all day every day, but stuff like Pink and White is like that. This record is going to be important 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years from now. I do think this is one of those discs that we could put it in a spaceship and send it out into the universe so that the aliens like us. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely that good. I felt like while I don't pump it every day, I have to acknowledge like there was an incredible run there where popular music was also very high quality music. And what's the best part about this stuff is the kids who sort of get interested in this stuff, a lot of these great artists like a Frank Ocean are very reverential about their influences. And they have definitely, if you start to follow out their family trees and stuff and you get out into the music that inspired them, they have impeccable creds there too. So I want to just throw in there the Frank Ocean album Blonde. You could go with the Channel Orange one too, but if you want to start somewhere, start with Pink and White. If that doesn't grab you, then you don't have a pulse.
Yeah, and of your list so far, I think this is the one I would concur the strongest with.
It's just untouchable. It's literally untouchable.
All right, so this is my my number 7. So we're almost at the end of the first part. What's that?
We are cruising.
Yeah, we are. Okay, so again, I'm going back to 2014. So maybe at some point down the road, we're going to have to talk about how strong of a year 2014 was in music, because it's already on my list. It's already on my list 4 times out of the 6. So this is Real Estate's Atlas. Nothing spectacular, no reinvention of the wheel here. Nothing dazzling. Really just a great sounding album, great songs, and one that and I've seen them live. I've seen them live once. I've seen Martin Courtney live. Never anything that just blows you away. Nothing that's going to knock you over. But it's certainly one that I've gone back to over and over and over again. And I can't even. I don't want to understate how much I've gone back to this album. I mean, for one thing, to me, it's like the perfect album for a road trip. It's just like perfect for travel. And another little tip, the Martin Courtney album that came out in 2015, which was called Many Moons? I believe it was called Many Moons. That's a really good companion piece to this. I'm not saying it's as strong, but it's maybe songs that were left over from this, because sonically it is not much different, even though it's a solo album. there isn't much deviation over what he was doing on this album. And then again, like this, there's not a dead spot on this album. It's just one good song, one really good song after another.
Yeah, please post some stuff from that solo record.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, I'm gonna bump up. My list isn't so sacred that I won't move things around. I'll just get my real estate pick out of the way. I picked the album before this, the album Days. I did it not because I don't think Atlas is strong. I think you could say In Mind is also strong. They have a run of 3 albums here in a row that are, first of all, the 3 of them combined into like a single playlist is all killer, no filler. That's what I just being honest with you, I go to my real estate playlist more often than I go to any single record. But I want to make a case here that the 2 singles from Days, Easy and It's Real, are among the tip top of their catalog. And I want to throw in, I will defer to the judges here, but the B-side of It's Real is a song called Blue LeBaron, which I have owned a Blue LeBaron before, which is another way of dating myself. One of those crappy old K cars. Blue LeBaron's one of my favorite real estate songs. I love it. So I'm going to give the nod to the album just before yours. I'm going to go with the Days album because the singles are super great. The B-side, Blue LeBaron, is the best name ever, and the song's really, really good. And I want to throw in one more. The cover for the album Days by Real Estate, there's a certain bleakness there. It's one of the more effective record covers there is. It just basically shows one of those like horrible lineups of these like plywood apartment buildings that get built in exurbs everywhere. It's just like this totally bleak lineup of these horrible plywood apartment buildings. It's very well done. The cover's well done. The album's well done. And I don't know the band Real Estate all that well. I don't know where they came from. I don't know how they.
Let me stop you there. They're a New Jersey band.
Yeah, Ridgewood. I'm looking at their entry here. Ridgewood's right over here too. Yeah. So they're around here. Interesting. All right. Well, they're in the hood. Well, someday we're going to have to talk about the music of New Jersey because the fact that this area produced both Real Estate and the Wrens is pretty amazing. So, and one of these dudes was in Titus Andronicus. Maybe they're in New Jersey.
Oh, yeah, they are. Yep.
Yeah. Like I say, I'm not a New Jersey homer. I live here by choice. I do enjoy it. I'm finding out that Real Estate's from here. All right, I double down. I'm going to go with my album, but I would say it's interchangeable with yours.
Yeah, and speaking of the aforementioned Titus Andronicus,
yes.
No spoilers, but I think we'll be talking more about them maybe next week. Yeah. Titus Andronicus, one of my favorite bands of this decade as well.
All right, you're up.
Oh, well, that's it. That's our list for this.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's our first 6 of the 12.
Ooh. All right, well, I'm excited because my next 6, those are the Holy of Holies. This is going to be exciting. Well, at least we could say this. Nothing from this year is on the list yet. You're heavy on 2014. I'm heavy on 10 and 11. I'm trying to think of which of these records we picked is the most current.
Let's see. Well, for this part of the list, I have all of those from 2014, and that's the most current for my list to this point. It will not be next week will be a different story, but
yeah, me too. So my most current record in my first half was the Frank Ocean. Actually, when we're done here, I'm going to lay down. I'm going to listen to the Frank Ocean record, and then tomorrow I'm going to take your Spoon recommendation. I'm ready to go.
Okay, and I've already posted the Martin Courtney songs onto our November list, and I am going to point this out. We're talking about the numbers, and I'm looking at the most popular streams from this album. The two songs that I like the best are number 4 and number 5. So they are not they're not the top of the list.
Well, well, well. Could you be more patrician? I'm just kidding. We're going to get accused of if we end up with any serious audience, I guarantee we're going to have the word patrician thrown at us. And while I can appreciate that, are you a fan of Anthony Fantano at all?
I don't know who that is.
Interesting. All right. Well, I will kick that to our next episode, because the next episode I am going to come armed with some of the more popular music reviewers and music review sites best ofs for the decade. So far, I'm not sure. I think the Frank Ocean one is a universal, but we're definitely picking off the beaten track based on what I've read so far. Maybe I just need to read better stuff. But
yeah, you know what? So be it if that's the case. I don't.
The Angel Olsen gets quite a bit of play.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
Again, to paraphrase Chadwick Boseman as James Brown, I'm going to trust God's ears.
You're making me feel self-conscious. I feel like I may be overly concerned with where our rankings rank. I will work on my meta problem, and I will try to come back with it solved next week.
You know, I have the faith that if there is difference, and even if there isn't, whatever the case, time will prove us right. That's my belief. So
time is the only way for the best ofs to be determined.
Yeah,
I really do. You do have to put your faith in future generations. That
it's served me well so far. I'm not going to say I'm the world's most authority, but I can't think of anything I've ever truly loved that has fallen by the wayside. That people later on said, "Oh yeah, that's not really that good. It's really only gone the other way." So.
Oh, well, you're very lucky, because I have plenty of bands that I swore by. I have bands that I was like a completist of, like The Cure, which history is being much more brutal to than I expected. I mean, the history is not being kind to The Cure.
Yeah, to some of the Cure stuff, I think time has been kind to. Maybe not all of it.
Yeah, they still sell plenty of tickets, that is for sure. But
yeah,
it's a bunch of old white people.
I don't think anybody's ever going to say Just Like Heaven. That's nobody's ever going to say Just Like Heaven's a horrible song or anything like that. Like, that's always going to be there.
Yeah, that's true. Although Dinosaur Jr., I believe their cover is of such stellar quality. It doesn't give the original a run for its money per se, but it's not an exaggeration to say that what Dinosaur Jr. did to that song added to the value of the song in general. I'm going to throw that on our list. That's a perfect one to jump in there.
Yeah, no, and a band that I don't know. I guess maybe with The Cure, you. Do you think of them as a singles band or not really a singles band?
Yeah, I think they're both. Their singles compilation is what broke them. Like that Standing on a Beach is what made them in this country the gigantic band that they are.
So there you go. It's a very rare quality for a band to have a foot in both of those territories,
All right. I'll come off the ledge. I'm not seeing. Did the SST catalog stuff from Dinosaur Jr. come off the internet? Oh no! Oh no! All right. Well, we'll figure it out. All right. Back next week. I think we have a pretty solid list so far. I think we're going. I think we're going to have some curveballs next week. That excites me.
Okay, so to answer your question, I do see SST stuff from Dinosaur Jr. Oh, and maybe I shouldn't play it, but there it is.
I don't see. Oh, there's Dinosaur. I don't see the cover of Just Like Heaven here on Mighty Spotify. That hurts my feelings. And somewhere out there, I don't know what the reach of this podcast is ever going to be, but somewhere in the world is a loser. One of my sisters, I have 3 sisters, one of their boyfriends raided my record collection and took from me many irreplaceable gems, and I've never been able to figure out exactly who did it, but they had taste. They didn't just grab anything. They were very selected what they stole. They stole my original Dinosaur Jr. Just Like Heaven 12-inch, which was a one-sided 12-inch with a J. Mascis etching on the other side. I've never been. I mean, it's not that it's rare, but I've never been able to replace it, and it drives me crazy that was stolen. Maybe I'm going to start a GoFundMe to replace my Just Like. The fact that it's not on the streaming services, and I no longer have the 12-inch, and I desperately now want to hear it, is really bummer.
Yeah, so this was definitely pulled from Spotify because I'm looking at. So it was on the remastered version of "You're Living All Over Me." Most of the songs are still on Spotify, but there are 2 that aren't, and Just Like Heaven is one of those.
All right. One day we are going to do a deep investigative report on who's the asshole who takes songs and puts them up and down and like makes these decisions.
Well, it's obviously record store or record company suits.
But why? What do they gain by depriving me of my sweet Just Like Heaven cover this evening? What are they gaining by not letting me listen to it? It's not in print. Like I could go buy I could buy a copy at the record store, but they wouldn't make a dime from it. I have to buy a used record. I don't understand the math. I just don't, and I know you're saying it's music, not math, but this is where the math and the music intersect. And Flick, I'm going to have to drag you kicking and screaming into the math side of it because I just you can talk about the math.
I think this establishes that where music and math meet is not a good place. Good things don't happen in that place. So, I mean, look at Math Rock.
Oh, I think that's a drop the mic moment. I think that I think enough said. As the kids said 50 years ago. Enough said.